Welcome to Off Panel.
Welcome to another emergency edition of Off Panel. I'm your host, David Harper, and with me again to break down the latest massive news to come from Marvel, it's AV Club's Oliver Sava. How's it going, Oliver?
I'm doing well. Excited to talk about the craziness of Marvel Comics right now.
Yeah, we're pretty much basically for the last 2 years have somehow created this long-running Marvel-centric podcast completely by accident.
But it only has, 4 episodes?
Yeah,
or something
frequency
at this point?
recently, though.
Yes, right? I mean, they're just dropping bombs left and right. Although I guess last bomb was dropped by DC, but it's a bomb that hits Marvel pretty hard.
Exactly. But so for listeners that don't know this, I imagine you heard if you're tangentially related to comics, but the big news today is that Axel Alonso, the longtime editor-in-chief who's been with Marvel for 17 years, is out as editor-in-chief, and in is C.B. Cebulski, who I don't remember what his title is, but basically he's been living in Shanghai making all kinds of deals with international groups for publishing comics and making comics under the Marvel umbrella, yada, yada, yada. It's crazy. It's a very big change. I think this is Marvel's only 4th editor-in-chief, basically, in the last, 20-something years. So they don't have these very often. So my question for you, Oliver, to kick things off, do you feel like this was a necessary move?
Necessary is an interesting word for that. I do think that it's a smart move. I don't know if there were no options left with Alonso that they had to have him replaced, but the last 3 years have been very, very rocky. Maybe 2 years. Post Secret Wars, the Marvel has felt kind of aimless.
Right.
And just the repetition of event after event, relaunch after relaunch, it became frustrating. It became frustrating for me as a reader, for me as a critic, for me as a fan, and I know retailers were also very frustrated by it.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting because I really think it's been basically since Secret Wars where it's really felt kind of, I don't know, aimless. And it's very interesting though, because during these past few years where things have been kind of all over the place, it's also been a time where there's been really good comics, but it's they're individual good comics as as opposed to being part of a larger whole. And I don't know, do you think it's that, do you think that kind of aimlessness is the main reason why this move happened?
I think so. I think also I don't think Marvel Legacy performed as well as they needed it to perform.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, those numbers are still are still trickling in on a month by month basis. New books are coming out every month, but it didn't blow up the fan community. And I don't think that comic shops were all that enthused about yet another, not a relaunch, but another big initiative from Marvel that seemed pretty half-assed, honestly. It's not like Marvel really brought in a bunch of new talent for this and launched a bunch of new books. It's kind of like the same assortment of titles, with some of them have modified creative teams. I mean, a lot of artist shakeups, but in general, things are staying kind of the same. The numbers are new. There's Marvel value stamps.
Which at first I was I honestly, I've been reading comics for a long time. I don't even remember those. Were those in the 70s?
70s, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that just seemed really strange. And initially I was kind of into the renumbering, but then I saw Matthew Rosenberg tweet today that The Punisher 218 was coming out, and I was so confused. I was like, that just seems wrong.
Yeah, no, I think it's a bad idea. I think it's actually a really bad idea. Doctor Strange 282 doesn't Like, that doesn't feel like it's a point where I can jump on easily. It was a very easy jumping on point, but that number itself is kind of scary. It makes me appreciate those, like, the lower numberings of relaunched books.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. I get why you do that, because number 5 is not as scary as number 629.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I was tweeting with somebody today, and we were talking about how it had made a little bit more sense if they waited to renumber each book until it was like at an anniversary issue. That way you could pick it up at like 700, like the Thor one was. But everything else was just kind of...
I mean, they're thinking long term, and some of these books are close. They're
Right.
close to a big issue. They're close to 300, close to 800. I think there's maybe something 800 or I'm confusing it with DC numbering, but like, they are close to these big milestones, but even then it's going to be a year out, maybe a year and a half, depending on if these books are coming out twice a month. So, yeah, the general direction of Marvel and the kind of the press around Marvel has seemed pretty dire over the last 2 years, especially over this past year. Secret Empire just got Marvel so much bad press.
Yeah.
And I didn't really pay attention to how it sold. I'm assuming it sold okay.
It was pretty middling for an event, because I actually did the numbers there, like issue by issue for a bit, between like Secret Wars, Civil War 2, and Secret Empire. And Civil War 2 was huge downgrade from Secret Wars, and then on top of that, Secret Empire was a pretty big downgrade from Civil War 2.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, Secret Wars was such a good event. Like,
so good.
We've talked about this in the past, where I've mentioned how I wish that Secret Wars kind of set that was how the entire Marvel lineup would be, with a bunch of different books that are all set in these different points of continuity, which, I mean, I don't know how that would work, and I'm sure a lot of people would get pissed off, but, you know, it would give us a lot of interesting books that take advantage of Marvel history in a way that feels like a legacy thing more than whatever they're doing with Legacy now. Like, I don't even really get what the Legacy banner means. Like, does that mean that you're looking to you want to redo past stories, or are you trying to capture some spirit of the past?
Right.
That will, like, make the future more exciting? Like, it's just...
It doesn't mean anything.
Not exactly. And Rebirth it had its flaws, but at the same time, like, it had a very, very clear statement.
Yeah.
And I got it. And I just don't really know what's going on with Marvel Legacy.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting, because the difference between it and Rebirth is, like, on the surface, they all sound the same. Like, you see what, like, Axel was saying when they announced Rebirth, or Legacy, and it sounded almost like Mad Lib's variation on what they said for what DC said about Rebirth, what Jeff Johns was saying in all the interviews. It sounded the same. The difference is application. Like, they're completely different in terms of how they applied the ideas that were going into it. Marvel's case, they didn't really apply the ideas, or they haven't seemed to, besides kind of, or like the Captain America book feels like it's kind of going for that feeling. But yeah, nothing else really does. But I mean, Captain America's the only one that had a huge difference or huge change in creative team.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Iron Man, this was the perfect time. And Iron Man's going to get a big change in creative team, because Bendis is going to be off of it. But like, Thor stayed the exact same. And I mean, I love the Thor team, so I don't want that to change right away. I mean, eventually it's going to change when Jason Aaron's done with his story. But yeah, it seems if you're going to do this, another big shakeup, at least shake it up. Mm-hmm. Like, don't say it's a shakeup, and just have new numbers and value stamps.
Right. So I wanted to throw something at you that I saw some people talking about this today. I had somebody tweeting me about this today. There was a lot of people who were, like, talking about how Axel's comments in particular about, like, the value of artists might have been, you know, something that could have impacted, like, him going away, especially given the fact that when you think about the fact that C.B. Cebulski, you know, was the guy behind Chester Quest, which brought in Sarah Pichelli and Gabriel Hernandez Walta and a bunch of other artists. Like, he did that. He's got great relations with all kinds of artists out there in the industry. Like, it's almost like that was like a response to that decision, and this has been coming for a while. Do you think that that's a factor? I mean, do you think that that is really that big of a deal to artists that you've talked to or that you know?
I don't know if it's that big of a deal, honestly, but I can I also know that when those statements came out, people were not happy.
No.
And like you've seen, I mean, I guess the biggest name I can think of is Olivier Coipel. Yeah, I think you pronounce it that way. And like he hasn't really done anything at Marvel recently other than covers. And he started to do more DC work. He's about to do this Miller World book. Like I think that Alonso's comments did leave a sour taste in a lot of artists' mouths.
Right.
But I don't know if that would be the kind of thing that would cause a board or like Quesada and Dan Buckley to like oust Axel Alonso. But at the same time, I think that Cebulski's established track record that is really, really good with securing talent and like helping that talent reach a certain level in the sort of the comics discourse is very, very valuable, and what Marvel needs. They could really use some like we talked about this last time. Who are the architects? Who are the people that are going to be shaping Marvel Comics for the next 5 years, the next 10 years? And there are a lot of really interesting creators at Marvel right now, but I just don't know if they are being given the opportunities to shape that line in a meaningful way that is going to bring in readers and also like showcase the best aspects of those creators.
Do you think so? I mean, you touched on this already, like some of the things that CB brings to the table. Do you think that CB Cebulski is a good fit to replace Alonso as editor in chief?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, he is the person that gave me Runaways, so he'll always have like a special place in my heart. And like the Tsunami line, very flawed, but I love the idea behind it of a line of comics that is a line of superhero comics that are targeted toward this manga audience that is at that time was just booming. And I mean, the manga audience is still huge. If you look at the list of the like 25 best-selling graphic novels of the year, that's not through Diamond. That's through like, I think it's Booklist or something.
Bookscan.
Like Bookscan, yes. Half of those are manga books.
Right.
They're huge. Like there's still just a gigantic audience for that. And he wanted to create superhero comics that would tap into that. And I mean, not all of them worked out, but at the same time, it also resulted in some really smart publishing moves, like putting out digest collections,
right?
Which is something that Marvel and DC don't really do. There was a period where Marvel was putting out a lot of its stuff in digests, and I don't know why that stopped. I mean, they're not as expensive as a full-sized collection, but I feel like you can move move those numbers much more, just more quickly, and those are more durable. They look better at a bookstore or a library, stuff like that. And I'm hoping that we'll see some more of that from Marvel in these upcoming years. Because who knows when Cebulski's actual influence is going to be felt on this larger line. Probably next fall when there's some sort of other new Marvel event, assuming there is another Marvel event. Maybe his big thing is that there aren't going to be any more constant relaunches.
Well, they did say that they're was it not doing events for 18 months? I mean, whether or not that actually happens is an entirely different story. I wouldn't be surprised to see a relaunch. I've been kind of feeling like we'd get a summer or fall one, but I think he's very good for Marvel for the reasons that you're saying. That like I like the fact that he brings an outside approach. I like the fact that he has dealt a lot with not just the traditional comics formats. Like I think that it's exciting to have somebody that might approach things a little bit differently. And also the fact that he just has great talent relations. Like so many, I know a lot of artists who absolutely adore the guy. I mean, I had Paul Azaceta on my podcast not that long ago, and he was talking about how he started his career in comics as CB Cebulski's assistant. And that's really interesting. I do like. I was reading this article on the Beat, which I thought was really weird. It's the headline is the most dramatic headline I've read today in comics. CB Cebulski's appointment as EIC signals that the old Marvel is dead, and I'm just like, I don't know. I mean, we don't know anything as to what it's going to be like, but I don't think that CB Cebulski is going to come in and be like, the direct market, we're out. We're not doing this anymore. I think really what we're going to see is we're going to see like slow implementation of change. But if anything, like Cebulski's been with Marvel for quite a long time himself, not as long as Alonso had been, but he also kind of came up through Marvel. He's like kind of like a farmhand for them. And I kind of wonder if they're bringing somebody in internally because they need somebody that kind of understands how Marvel works, and they need somebody who can kind of repair that shared universe element that's been missing for the last while.
Absolutely. I mean, I had like no misconceptions that they would bring in some outside person to. I mean, I wasn't thinking that Alonso was going to be replaced anytime soon,
right?
But I certainly wouldn't have expected it to be somebody that wasn't in Marvel Comics. We know that these places hire from within. They hire from within for creators on their books. They go with the people that they have established relationships with. I mean, this is a thing that's at like every single business.
Mm-hmm.
If you can hire somebody that you already know that has been working with you and doing good things for you, of course you're going to put them in a new position with like more responsibility.
Right. I you know, the thing I'm going to be really interested to see is, and we're gonna talk about Axel and what went right and what went wrong for him. But I think the problem overall for Axel Alonso is he's a phenomenal editor. Like that guy created the Max line. He edited Preacher. He edited 100 Bullets. He edited a lot of comics that I absolutely love. I think he's a really good editor, but I think he was miscast as an editor-in-chief. And I'll be interested to see how CB Cebulski fits in because, like, I don't know. It's tough to have somebody that can kind of be that architect that can, you know, trust everyone to do what they need to do without getting too in the weeds, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see, but I'm kind of curious. Do you feel like Marvel missed the chance? Like, one of the interesting things about where Marvel's at is there's two things. They have the actual content of their books, the fact that there's lacking cohesion in the whole line, but then there's also the fact that a lot of retailers and a lot of readers are even upset with the fact that like they're so variant heavy, they're so obsessed with variants. Like, I'm not saying that I want somebody to be fired, and I also like this person, but it kind of feels weird that it seems like they're putting a lot of blame on Axel Alonso when I feel like some of the blame should at least go on David Gabriel too. And do I seem outlandish in saying that?
Oh no, I mean, the blame is going to get passed around. It's no one person's decision to do these kinds of things. And David Gabriel is the person that has, or that is supposed to have, the most like intense relationship with comic shops.
Right.
So you expect him to know what's going on with comic shops. And when I go, like, I just had this conversation with the owner of my shop last week, and she brought up that exact thing. She's like, Marvel is back on its same old shit, where it is putting out all these variants and there's all these numbers that we have to deal with.
Right.
And it's just like they make it so complicated for these retailers in a way that they don't want to deal with that shit. There are other options.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I guess like I feel like if CB Cebulski comes in and you know, I don't want to say fixes things because that's like saying that all of Marvel is bad right now. And there's way too many comics at Marvel that I really enjoy that for me to say that like the Marvel line is horrible right now. But if they fix the cohesion problem, I still think that they're going to have this active problem of not really seeming like they understand both what retailers and readers actually want from their Marvel comics. And it's like, I don't know, the tricky thing with the variants is they put retailers in a bad spot, not just because it's complicated to order them, but also because they create these desirable variants and then readers can't get them and become mad at their shops because they're not going to order them. It's I don't know. It's very complicated.
Yeah, that's legit. And it's like, it's not that we didn't want to order them. It's that we had to order 50 issues of Ben Reilly so that we could get one variant for this issue of Astonishing X-Men. And everybody's going to want that variant. But you know what? Who's buying my freaking Ben Reilly issues?
Right. It's insane. Yeah, no, I mean, it's like the lenticulars with Marvel Legacy and everything. My shop up here in Anchorage, they have so many copies of those lenticulars left, and they have like a bunch. They have stacks of Marvel, like the Legacy books, and it's just kind of unfortunate because they've been put in a position to have all this backstock so they could order these lenticulars, which in of themselves did not even sell. And it's like, it's kind of a weird thing. They got schemed into something that wouldn't even sell on its own right. But
yeah, I didn't even see any lenticulars at my store. I don't think they ordered any. They were just like, you know what? We went through the lenticular the phase of the new 52. Like we don't have to deal with that again if we don't want to. And I don't think that there was a response from their subscribers being like, make sure you get me that lenticular variant. I need to know how this cover homages this cover from 40 years ago. Like, who was really clamoring for that? Not to mention, that was like the worst news day ever when Marvel was like, get ready.
We're going to break the internet.
Everything's going to change forever. And it was like, why are you just showing me these GIFs, guys? I get it. This is an homage cover to something else. This is something that's been done many, many times.
Oh, my God. I remember that day was so weird because it was just like there was this constant feeling of like, that can't be it. No way. There's got to be something else coming. And there wasn't. So I want to ask, like, I already touched on this. I want to look back on the Axel Alonso era. Like I said, he's been there for 17 years. He was editor-in-chief, I think, for 6. For you, let's start with what went right. What, looking back on Alonso's run, what went right? Like, what did you like about what Alonso accomplished?
I mean, when he came to Marvel in the early 2000s, that was when I was getting into comics.
Yeah.
So many comics for me are comics that Axel Alonso worked on. And, like, those are big, important comics for me. So, like, I mean, probably the biggest one is X-Force Ecstatics, which I think is, like, maybe the best example of like what Axel Alonso can do when he is really committed to thinking outside the box.
Right.
And he brings in Peter Milligan, who like he knows from the Vertigo days. He brings in Michael Allred, and they're given complete freedom, and like he gives them enough guidance so they don't go completely off the rails. But like for the most part, he lets them do what they want to do, and it was awesome. Like, I just loved that book. And, I mean, even as editor-in-chief, I thought that those years leading up to Secret Wars were really, really good. When DC was kind of in the dumps with the New 52, I thought that Marvel was having this amazing creative resurgence. But then I don't know. I wonder if it was... if so many Marvel creators leaving for Image was like a blow that they couldn't really come back from.
Right.
There was just a lot of I'm sure there's so much that went on behind the scenes that I don't even know about, but things have started to kind of fall apart over the last few years.
Yeah, it is really interesting. And like, I kind of wonder how much of like the turmoil comes from like, I don't know. I mean, like, we're not behind the scenes. We don't know what's really going on there, but it's like, it kind of feels like there was almost like a divide between editorial and like the sales and marketing side. It's like, which one was defining the direction? Like, did you see that thing that came out today where Jeff Lemire did an interview with like an Italian comic book site? And he said he was talking about how he loved working on Moon Knight, but how like basically his run on X-Men was completely defined for him before he even got there, and he was just basically following a track that was already set out for his stuff, and he hated it. And I thought that was really fascinating. And it's like, I'm kind of curious as to what was really going on behind the scenes, but largely I think Axel Alonso's time is kind of underrated at this point, just because the last couple of years, like I said, the Max line was huge for me. X-Force was huge. He did really great stuff when he was running the X-Men line. Like, I loved Messiah Complex. I thought that was a great event. And oh no.
No. I liked it.
Oh, and then there's like, I do think that he empowered a lot of outside the box thinking, and he did bring on a lot of books that were really interesting. Like, Tom King was talking about how he was a huge supporter for The Vision. And, Squirrel Girl is a book that happened under his watch, and it's not something that probably would have ever happened before. Ms. Marvel, there's a lot of books that you can like point to as, titles that just really wouldn't have happened in the past for Marvel. But I think Axel was kind of, he feels like he was very enabling on the writer's side at the very least to approach these outside the box ideas. And I do appreciate that about him. And it seems like most people liked him based off of what I've seen, but I don't know. I think that he did a lot of really great things in supporting creators. It's just the last couple of years kind of killed him.
And I think that there were some really good efforts from Marvel to, like, quote unquote, diversify its line as well. And not all of those things worked, but there was an effort to change what the main Marvel characters looked like, and to have them be people that weren't just the typical white male, like superhero mold.
Right.
But on the flip side of that, there's the fact that the trinity of the Avengers, Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, those characters that people know them best as and that are like shown in other media are not in the comic really.
Right.
Which can be alienating people. I don't mind. I liked having other characters in those roles, but I can also understand how that would be an issue.
Mm-hmm. It is, it's really interesting. It's like, I appreciate Axel Alonso for his time taking all these risks. Like, he took a lot of risks that I think a lot of people wouldn't necessarily have done. But the interesting thing is like, I almost feel like the worst thing he did is he took too many risks at the same time. And it's like, once you kind of take on so much risk, it like becomes a weight around you, and then it just kind of crumbles. And it is really interesting how, like, I feel like at this point Marvel as a whole has like been doing so many kind of risky moves that, like, who knows how they're going to work out. He was throwing so much shit against the wall and seeing what sticks, that they got to a point where it's almost like the one audience was mad at him for the SJW stuff. They're like, oh, they're rooting comics with all their SJW ways. And then an entirely different side was saying that he was just like employing tokenism and that he was being kind of a jerk on that side. And the diverse stuff was very hollow. And it's interesting. I kind of feel like they're in a damned if you do, damned if you don't type situation.
Well, the big issue is that it was kind of superficial because you still had predominantly white creators working on these characters.
Yeah.
I just saw somebody tweeting about how, I've seen multiple tweets about if black women wrote every black female lead in a comic, there would be no problem, like, there would be a huge amount of black women writing comics right now, because there are a lot of leads that are all being written by white men.
Right.
And Marvel is guilty. DC is guilty. Image is certainly guilty. Like, all of these places are guilty of it. And there's the presentation of diversity because it's literally what people are seeing. But if you're not paying attention to who's actually working behind the scenes, who's putting those stories together, you won't realize that
it's ultimately
these stories are not being told by a diverse group of creators. And that's way more important to me than having a character of color.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's so much more important that the people that are telling these stories are people of color, are LGBT, that they just represent a broader variety of experiences than we typically see.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess I hadn't thought of it like that. I guess I was thinking more in a superficial fashion, but yeah, I totally see what you're saying there. So I to close, I want to talk about where Marvel's at right now. What level of nervousness do you have about Marvel kind of through the prism of the past couple months on a scale of 1 to 10? I don't want to extend over the last couple years, but Bendis left. They had this turnover. Legacy has not been what anybody would consider a massive success. Are you fairly nervous about where Marvel's at right now? Or do you think that this might lead to them coming out of it?
I think it's all cyclical.
Yeah.
We were just here with DC less than 5 years ago. And they made changes. They took some chances. In some areas, they didn't take chances, but they figured out a way to get people excited about DC Comics again.
Right.
And like that's a thing. We're talking like we both acknowledge that there are really great books at Marvel right now, but it's not just about being passionate about books. It's about being passionate about the line, being passionate about the publisher,
right,
and feeling like the publisher is in a good place. And I mean, I think that can easily change. That can change in a year. That can change in 6 months if they release a bunch of really interesting new books with like ideally some new creators, but maybe some established creators that have a big following that will follow them. I mean, I think that like putting Greg Rucka on Wonder Woman for DC Rebirth was a huge deal because he has a relationship with DC already, with that character already, but he has changed, and the character has changed so much since he last wrote her that there's like this new excitement of seeing him back on her.
Right. And also, I feel like to a certain degree, having Rucka on that book like legitimized the whole line because Rucka came back for it.
Exactly, and it was a person that like had left on not great terms.
Right.
So clearly there was something that happened behind the scenes in the editorial department that convinced Rucka now would be a good time to come back. I mean, part of me wonders if it was Wonder Woman no longer being part of the Superman.
Yeah.
The Superman editorial office.
Right. Yeah.
So I definitely think stuff can turn around really quickly. I mean, we'll find out really soon. There's so much change that's happening right now, and we're not going to know what this landscape looks like until, I mean, we'll start seeing in solicits, I guess. But even then, I doubt we're going to be seeing anything big until at least a year from now.
Yeah.
Because I mean, Alonso has stuff planned out. I'm sure they had editorial meetings that planned stuff years in advance. So this teaser for some new Infinity Gauntlet thing that came out today, I'm sure that was part of whatever Axel had planned.
Right.
And that's going to pull us through this next year. But remember, they aren't doing any more events. So,
right.
This Infinity thing, it's definitely not an event. It's, every single book's going to be involved and it's going to be 8 issues.
Right. I do kind of miss the day where they would do like a 5-issue, like little, like Annihilation. Annihilation was something that stood out entirely on its own and it didn't bring in other books. Like I like that about Annihilation. I miss kind of having events that could do their own thing where it doesn't have to bring everything in. Like, what if this was another Infinity Gauntlet type book that was just a 5-issue miniseries that maybe happened all over, like, every week in May when Infinity War happened? I think that'd be kind of cool. And then it would kind of feel different. It wouldn't feel like the slog that events do. But that teaser was not inspiring.
No, that was a capital B bad teaser. I was like, really, guys? This is what you're going for?
The hype.
I get Legacy Retro, but that is a boring image and a boring design for a poster with no information. And it coming after this day where people are wondering what is the future of Marvel going to look like.
Right.
So you guys aren't detracting from the main story. I know you're trying to, but you're definitely not with this Ron Lim Infinity teaser.
Poor Ron Lim. No,
I shouldn't be mean to Ron Lim. He's just doing his job.
I do think I think people forget a lot that like Marvel plans these things out so far in advance. Like they'll be using Axel Alonso's playbook for quite a while now. And, we're not going to see change overnight. So I hope that people are patient with like Cebulski and give him a chance to actually like make his mark. But it'll be interesting to see how the next few months play out for him. But I do want to ask, like, okay, so, if we were CB Cebulski, what would you like to see? Like, what were the 3 things you'd like to see from Marvel next year?
I mean, it would be controversial, but I would cut like 25% of the books.
I'd cut 40%.
Yeah, right. I mean, I want to like lowball it and say 25, but I mean, there are a lot of books that can get cut, and like I don't want to see some of these books go, but there are just so many Marvel books that. Granted, what am I talking about? I don't want to see the books I like go. Those can be in the 75% that stay. But
Right.
like, there's so much just extra junk that
Right.
doesn't need to exist.
Well, and the tricky thing is like, you know, if you cut the 40% or 25% or whatever, it's like you could do what DC did where you double release the big books and you're still making your money that way. And beyond that, you could, you know, right now they have a bit of a creative drain. You could focus the creators more on books that are like, I don't know, big sellers or anything like that. And then beyond that, you could, oh my God, I completely lost my other point. Fail. Anyways, ultimate point is like you could condense what you have, and I know what I was going to say. It's easier to market less books. Like
Yeah, of course.
one of the problems right now is they have so many books that it's like there will be comics that I walk into the comic shop on Wednesday and it's a number one that's released, and I'm fairly connected, and I didn't even hear about it before then. Like I see Big Bang Comics doing their tweets about their weekly sales, and sometimes I think they're making comics up because I've never heard of it.
Marketing is a really good point because I think that the house ads for Marvel Legacy are a shit show.
Right.
There's like four, I'm going to say between 3 to 5 like books being spotlighted on a page. It's a giant wall of text. It gives
says
you no
nothing.
information. Like it's a total mess that doesn't make me want to go and read those books. It's just really frustrating. I want to see way less ongoings, more miniseries, more original graphic novels. Like, stop. You need to change the distribution model and like how you are putting books out.
Mm-hmm.
If like a book like Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur does not need to come out monthly.
Right.
That book should come out maybe every 3 months in like a 96-page digest.
Oh man, I would love to see like that would be on my list. I want to see more playing around with formats, but I would love to see digest come back because I know that they're awkward for comic shops to shelve, but at the same time, like maybe it's just a bookstore thing. I don't know.
But also, adapt or die. Put some small bookshelves in your comic shop. Like,
They got manga already.
Just lower the shelf down by one little bracket thing. So now it looks different. But I think people will be able to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And also, they're just so much more durable. Like, I think Marvel trades right now are actually a total mess. I think Marvel needs to completely readjust its entire trade policy because the paper is really flimsy. The books feel so thin that, like, I'll hold an Image book that has the exact same page, the exact same number of pages, same issues. It might have some more extras or whatever, but the Image book feels so much sturdier than this Marvel book, which is probably going to be like $6 to $10 more expensive.
Yeah, it's amazing comparing the hardcovers too. Like, did you look at the Paper Girls first hardcover?
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's amazing. It's beautiful. And like the paper quality is just fantastic. And it's upsetting how different that is than, like, I don't know. I remember when Marvel was releasing those hardcovers, like Rage of Ultron and everything like that. And then there was like the global something that it was Marvel, or it was Avengers Endless Warfare. It was a Warren Ellison, I think Mike McCone book.
Yeah.
I was going to buy that, but it was like, it was nothing. It was basically like paper mache. It was nothing.
Yeah, it was a real thin book that was like $25. Mm-hmm. I mean, even like, I'm glad that they put out a Squirrel Girl OGN,
yeah.
But it was too expensive. Like, that book needed to be $15 max and smaller. Like, I like that they did a hardcover, but if you're going to do a hardcover, do like a first, second style hardcover. Yeah. Like, that is a book that is not made to sell like crazy in a comic shop. Yeah. That is a book that will end up in libraries. Libraries will buy many copies of that. A bookstore is going to sell those really, really easily.
Yeah, I don't understand why you wouldn't do like a $10 digest version for libraries, almost in particular, of the Squirrel Girl OGN. But all right, so what's your third thing? Do you have a third thing?
I mean,
I think ultimately it's got to be like something about the problem is I think my biggest issue with Marvel right now is so difficult to kind of pin down like what would fix it, like, you know, the shared universe problem, the fact that everything doesn't feel cohesive. I mean, I'd like them to fix that, but I don't know how to fix that. So I guess
we talked about it on Twitter, where I think that all superhero comics need to embrace a continuity-free line, or like an evergreen line that's just like superhero comics that somebody can pick up at any time. They don't need to know a bunch of random junk about it. They can be rooted in any period of a character's history, but you have to make it accessible to just a regular person that doesn't know 40 years of whatever character history.
The tricky thing is like you have there's two major problems with that. One is like the shared universe is one of the things that makes Marvel. It's like what makes it special in a lot of ways. And I do think that there should be continuity free areas. I like the idea of doing a 60-40 split, as you were tweeting with I think it was Levi Hunt about that. And the other thing is like one of the big things for comic shops is like there is like a low key like addictive quality to like the regularity of, you know, having these stories continue on a regular basis. And if you don't have that, it makes it kind of more like a series of standalone series. It's hard to get the repetition for the business. And I know that might be a problem unto itself, but it is kind of interesting.
Yeah, but it's just, I think that if you put really great creators on these books, people will come to them. I mean, if Tom King wants to do 12 issues of Fantastic Four set in the first 2 years of Kirby and Lee Fantastic Four or something, like, you should let him just do that.
Right. This would be a really good time to tout your article today, which was great, by the way. I was going to bring up Unstable Molecules because you started bringing that up. I mean, I read a Tom King written like Unstable Molecules type story. I mean, it wouldn't have Guy Davis on it probably, but still, that'd be amazing.
Oh God, I love Unstable Molecules, and I love Omega the Unknown too. Like, have you ever read Omega?
I bought it in single issues, and it was the most maddening comic I've ever read in single issue form.
Yeah, no, I read the first two in single issues, and then I did not keep buying it, but I found them all together in a like a bundle for $10 at a comic shop, so I bought it. And reading them all together, I was like, this is incredible. I absolutely loved it. You should definitely reread it. It is really, really good and really, really weird. But yeah, I mean, do you want me to say what the piece was about?
Yeah,
or...
Go ahead. Well, let's
so I read about, Squirrel Girl. And so Squirrel Girl's issue last week was this special zine issue that was a zine released by Squirrel Girl featuring stories from Marvel characters. And almost all of them are written by ongoing writer Ryan North, with one by Erica Henderson.
Which is amazing.
Yes, and all of the artists are they're from all over the comic scene. So you have like some newer talents like Madeline McGrain, I believe. But then you also have like Carlos Speed McNeil and Michael Cho and Anders Nilsson, who, like, when I saw that he was on that book, I was like, that is so strange.
Stranger than Jim Davis?
Right, Jim Davis. Oh my God. And doing like a perfect Jim Davis story. Yeah. Like story. It was comic strips, which is exactly what you want. It was just so smart. It was so experimental, so playful, and it made me really, really excited. And at the end of that, I also brought up X-Men Grand Design, which is coming next month. Ed Pisker's X-Men miniseries, which is like 5 40-page issues that he has complete control over. It's 6?
It's 6.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So
because
it's two. Basically, it's 3 2-issue limited series is how he described it to me. Where like he does the 2 issues, and then it's going to release a big trade with both of them in there, and like in the first issue and in the first trade, he's gonna recolor Jack Kirby's X-Men #1, like with Stanley obviously, but to like recolor his art in the same style that he's doing Grand Design, which is really kind of interesting. Yeah, but I do want to point out that's an Axel Alonso joint. He was the one who made that happen.
Yep, and I guess I don't think Axel was responsible for Strange Tales.
No, well, it was a Max book, and he was the guy who was running the Max line.
Yeah, but it was at a weird spot because I think that's when he had maybe moved over to X-Men. But either way, like, the piece was about the value of bringing in people from outside of superhero comics and letting them do their own thing. Like, it's not just about bringing people from outside of superhero comics into superhero comics, because that won't mean anything if you're like Jeff Lemire's Extraordinary X-Men run and you hire that person and you're like, here's a track, do not deviate from it.
Right.
Like, we need you to hit all of these points and enjoy your restrictions. Like,
yeah, I mean, I think if one thing has definitely become clear, it's like, you gotta, I don't know, whatever they do next, like let the creators embrace who they are and find their voices with these books, because that Squirrel Girl in general is a perfect example of Marvel gone right, where like Ryan North and Erica Henderson, like I can't even imagine that book with anybody besides those two on there, and Rico Renzi. But yeah, it'll be interesting. Everybody go read Oliver's piece on that. Oliver, I'm going to let you go so you can go write. I know you have more writing to do, but thank you for coming on and chatting as per usual.
Thank you so much for having me. Always a pleasure. If there's another emergency, call someone else.
Thanks for listening to yet another emergency podcast with the AP Club's Oliver Sava. You can find Oliver on Twitter at Oliver Sava. If you're a fan of the show, there's some big news. Off Panel now has a Patreon. If you like the show and want to support it, consider backing it on Patreon at patreon.com/offpanel. There are fun rewards and insider information you can get if you do. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Brian McRae, Benjamin Birdie, Henning Allers, Modern Magic Stories, Nick Hall, Bruno Batista, Abraham Reisman, Adrian Diaz, Bobby Angus, Bjorn Basin, Darren Neely, John Hendrick, Steve Anderson, Michael Perlman, Phil Nall, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Benjamin Shipper, Colin McMahon, Chris Palmer, Maxwell Schmidt, Dan Lee, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Lou Iovino, Christopher Carter, Nicholas Kessley, Brian Dickerson, Greg Rucka, Ryan Mail, Adam Highfill, Nicholas Gardner, Andrew Corrigan, Fiona Staples, Chris Morris, Johan Barander, Chris O'Halloran, Mark Abnett, Matt Pataglia, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim DiMonacos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. Don't forget to like the show on Facebook at /sketched. That's SKTCHD. Follow on Twitter at SketchComic, or follow me at @SliceFriedGold. Want more from Off Panel? Subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher and give the show a rating and review while you're at it. A quick thanks to the band Wolfpack, whose excellent track outro from their album Volmilch opens and closes the show now. Give them a listen as they're totally rad. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.